talking about how boys learn and, the differences between boys and girls, because especially for us single mothers, we get frustrated with our boys. And I do believe it's because we don't understand their temperament and just how boys are, other than the fact that every child is different. Boys just totally different from girls. So talk to me about some of those differences between boys and girls, especially when learning and how they interact is concerned.
Well, I guess in relation to learning, where I would start is I would just start with the brain development, because that's basically where learning happens, right? So basically what happens that in general, the hippocampus, the region of the brain that controls like memory and is responsible for memory and attention and language and so on, it develops faster in girls than it does in boys. And which is why you'll find like sometimes the girls will learn to read faster than the boys. Obviously, there are outliers, and every single child is not the same. Every boy is not the same. But for the most part, you'll finding the girls' verbal and language skill developing faster, which is what you rely on in like early education. Your memory for your math and your numeracy and your verbal skills for your language. So while at the same time where this is happening with the girls, what is happening with the boys is that the greater part of their cerebral cortex is dedicated to like spatial and mechanical functioning and visual experience.
Why they like to pull things apart, right?
Right. So they will learn better. So they will learn better with like movement and pictures rather than just words. And there was
right. Is that why girls do better with what they call rote learning?
Rote learning, right? Because their memory function is developed, their working memory is developed, and once they can hold it in their working memory and repeat it enough times, it gets placed in the long-term memory. But if your working memory is not developed or compromised in some ways, the information is not going to be transferred. And I was reading a study, and it was actually saying they were looking at like toys, like if toys, it's a nature versus nurture kind of thing, or if boys and girls are attracted to a particular type of toy. And that particular study, it showed that where for girls, it didn't really matter if it was a doll or a truck. Like the baby boys move towards the truck. And I guess it was more having to do with the ability to pull it apart versus like a doll, which is just one,
right. Like usually what? Pull off the head and that's it.
Yes, right. But sometimes it wasn't a pull off, it was like like the cloth doll, so you couldn't pull it up.
Okay. Yes.
That they had used. So that I guess is lending or supporting the theory about the whole mechanical functioning and spatial and visual, and visual experience. So because of that brain development or how the brain develops, it would you will see differences, or your approach needs to be different in teaching them, because they can learn. You'll just have to teach them in a different way. It's not what they can learn, but it's how they can learn, or not what you should teach, but how you should teach. But saying all of that, though, it is important to know that obviously there are outliers. So there are some boys who
there's always an exception to the rule,
right? Who won't fit in. And typically, if you look at it, by the time the boys reach 12th grade, 6th form, thereabouts, they kind of settle off with the girls. Like you can't really tell any difference in terms of how they learn. So it's the early years and the developing years that we need to pay.
Right.
We need to pay attention to.
I remember reading once, and that I found interesting too, that the person was even pointing out the fact that men don't have butt like women do. Women have that cushioning. So even sitting longer, a woman can sit longer more comfortably than a boy or a man can. And I went, maybe there is something to it. I don't know, because boys do tend to move a lot more. They don't sit still as much. And that, I don't know if that made sense, but I found it interesting.
Well, I mean, I get where you can think about it in terms of a man and a woman, but I think with little kids, it probably has more to do with like levels of serotonin that's produced in a girl versus a boy. So there's that ability. And remember also with the, like in the hippocampus, that's what allows the focus and the concentration. So if they can concentrate longer, they can therefore sit longer. But if the part of your brain that is developed requires movement or pushes you toward movement, you're not going to sit still.
Yeah, exactly. Because if you look at my house with online learning now, if you look at my house, my older son, he sits around the table with his laptop and does work. My younger, he's in the bedroom, around the table, walking up and down, has a laptop in his hand in the kitchen. He's just all over the place. Now, I know a typical or Jamaican parent might say, why don't sit down one place? But I know he, because what I use in as I tell him, I say, I'll wait to see the report. And when I see the report, it's quite fine.
Right.
He just cannot sit still like that. That's not him. And I'm not going to force
just
it.
transition into high school. He's still developing.
Yes.
He's still developing. His brain is still growing. So that will happen. It's not like you get to high school and you flip a switch and they cannot sit down. And especially they're coming from primary school where they have the chance to ramp and play and recess and let out some of that. They're not going to just automatically transition to high school and just be like, okay, I can sit still, I can move from class to class. There is some adjustment to be made, and parents should.
Even outside of the school thing, I've seen it. Thank God I learned this from early, but I've seen parents with boys wanting them to sit still. And I'm like, they can't. Both my sons, when they were younger, even my mother would be like, why you don't let them sit down to eat? Because I'd sit there, I'd eat, they run up to the table, I feed, they run gone. I'm eating, they run up to the table, I feed. And I was told who was spoiling them and I must make them sit down. And I try to tell people that, look, I pick my battles. They're eating. They're eating.
There you go. What is it you want? What is it you want? Pick one. You want them to eat or you want them to sit still, because you're not going to get both of them.
Listen, both of them have climbed out of that high chair, etc. So for me, it was like, if they feel the need to move, I'll let them move.
Let them move.
Yeah, I think it's very important that mothers understand that boys in that sense. And as of course, we both will keep mentioning there's always an exception to the rule. But on average, boys move more. Whether I don't remember which hormone you said it was, testosterone or whatever it is, they move more.
They move more.
Okay. So the next thing I wanted to ask you is, how do we? What's the word? I was going to say, how do we learn? How our boys learn? But how do we find out how it is our boys learn? They talk about the audio, the visual. You've used the words also. How can we understand our boys' learning style?
The first thing I would say to that is, well, depending on how old your child is, because my children are older, I'm going to say is talk to them and ask them. But for the most part, observe. And why I say talk to them, what I mean by that is, I remember we were going through some things, like revising. I was helping my son revise, and there were things, and he was reading, he was putting in the hours, but for some strange reason, he wasn't able to properly articulate like the response.
Okay.
So it's almost like he was trying to remember what exactly was written. And I'm like, no, as long as you understand, you don't need to remember it. So I started asking, like, what is it happens? Like, if I say sole trader, what happens in your head? What happens in your head? For example, before I tell you what he said, like, if I say to you, marketing, what happens in your mind? Is it like, do you see words? Do you see pictures? What is it that you see? No, like, that's what you do, right? Marketing, like, what is it that you see?
Oh,
Like,
Um,
yeah, just stop and think about it. Or
pictures. Well, I'm a very visual person. I'm always seeing pictures. Everything in my head is a movie.
right, it's a movie. So he said like he sees images. So I said, okay. I said, if I say define soul trader, what happens in your head? And he's like, I see a man in a shop, and he's just in the shop by himself, and it's a small shop.
Mhm.
And I'm like, yeah, but that's what a soul trader is. It's an individual who runs a small business by themselves.
Right.
So all you have to do, so then what I realized I needed to work on was to help him interpret those images
Mm-hmm.
that he was seeing. The younger one, when I ask him like what he sees, what he will see is the words, like the whole paragraph of what he's read,
Right, right.
or the worded definition, like a book. So it
Mm-hmm.
comes to him
Mm-hmm.
like a section out of a book. So
Right.
he has an easier time
Mm-hmm.
writing it down. But I realized, okay, what I have to do is to let the older one know that he can trust the images that he sees, because from all the questions I'd asked him, the images he described explained perfectly what
Right.
exactly I wanted him to say, or what the response was. So for older children who can articulate, I say ask them.
Mm-hmm.
Observe. For the younger ones, the little ones, observe. Just watch what they're drawn to. Like when you give them free play and unstructured play, are they going to sit and read, or do they want to watch TV? Or when you try to teach them ABCs, do they sing it and watch it, or they'd rather watch it on like Super Y, or
Mm-hmm.
read it in a book? And you just kind of watch and observe and see what they gravitate towards. um get a professional assessment. Go
Yeah.
to an education psychologist and let them do the test, and they will tell you, or their learning style quizzes online, that you can
Mm-hmm.
try it, and it will give you an idea. But if you have to answer the questions yourself for your child, I would say, before you go ahead and answer them, observe and not
Mm-hmm.
just assume. Because sometimes, because we learn a certain way, we see what we know. So we're like, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
he read the book yesterday, so yeah, he likes reading. But if we paid attention, we're like, okay, so he reads, but he does this more, or he does that more.
Exactly.
So observe,
Exactly.
professional assessments, observe your child, ask them, and
Mm-hmm.
explore different approaches. So if you're teaching the same thing, even if something works or seem to work, just try 2 or 3 more options or styles to see which one they gravitate more towards, or which one gives you a faster result.
Right.
So
Yeah, it's
that is,
funny. Your older son is like my younger and other way around, because my older has that I call it the photographic memory. He'll read the thing and he can write almost exactly what he read. So when I realized he was doing that though, my first concern is, okay, so he has a photographic memory. Are you understanding what you're reading? So I would ask him questions in a totally different way to see if he would grasp, because my whole thing, because people would think that because you can regurgitate the information, or you're bright, or you're
you
whatever.
understand. Yeah, but it's
No,
about the application.
exactly. So I reword, if they say read this paragraph and answer these questions, and usually in the books they write the questions almost directly from the paragraph. I would take the book and rearrange the question to see, did you understand what you read?
Right.
Now my younger is like your older. He know that's why he loves Diary of a Wimpy Kid, and I tell people this. Why you think Diary of a Wimpy Kid is a big seller? Because they use pictures in the book. Even though it have a lot of words, those little cartoon drawings make a big difference to a visual kid.
And as you talk about books, one of the things I notice as well, with a lot of parents, they try to, when they're getting their children to read, or the younger ones to read, they
Mhm.
try to give them book books that they liked, or they liked as a kid, or that they think, or a book that might be popular, or a book with a certain, I don't know what word to use, because I don't think they're bad books, so I don't want to use a word that thinks it's bad. But when my older one was struggling with his reading, and we were reading the classics, I got them out, and it was Diary of a Wimpy Kid, Horrid Henry, Captain Underpants. It was books about like vomiting and
Yes.
toilets and just anything, like a lot of things that we might find quote unquote
Gross.
disgusting or gross.
Yes.
It was, so it's also about finding things that interest them. And
Exactly.
unfortunately, it's not always going to be football.
Yeah,
You know,
it's not.
it's not going to be football all the time, or some kind of sports. It's going to be gross things. It's going to be horrible history. It's going to be talking about, it's wanting to read about people chopping off people's heads.
Yes,
And
that's my
so
younger.
on. So
Mhm.
you have to be mindful of that as well.
And that's a big thing. People, a lot of, especially mothers, us mothers need to understand about boys, because we're in such a PC era. If a little boy makes that gun thing, people get all, oh no, and you don't give him guns. So as you mentioned, some boys just love that. They'll do the Star Wars, the sword. I mean, my younger son, it's all of the saber, what's lightsaber and swords. I always have to be buying him all these little, swords and shields and all of that. That's just somehow some boys are
I
made to
was
do. And
I
he's
was
not a
that I
wild
was
person.
that mother. I was a no Nerf gun, no gun anything. And it didn't matter that they didn't see it or they didn't have it, but anything, a stick,
Exactly.
newspaper,
Exactly.
placemat, they would Legos, they would fashion it
Exactly.
into a brick and into a gun. And then I'm just like, you know what? All right, you win. Take the Nerf gun, go ahead. We and then my older son, he wanted to like learn more about guns, and I'm just like, hold on, so what am I going to do now? So I'm like, okay, what am I going to do? And then I'm like, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to look at like the first gun and stuff, how that came about, whatever. And
Yeah.
then that obviously came about out of the world wars. And then he got caught up into like military gear, and then that led to his interest in history, and obviously because it's wars and expansions and takeovers into geopolitics. And if I didn't give in to the gun situation or the request to learn about guns, we would not have been here.
Exactly.
We
And
would not have been here.
I'm glad you said that, because thank God I learned this early too. Is to the thing that you might think, oh my gosh, why is my child gravitating toward this? You can use it as an instrument to get, as you said, he went off into history, and my older was into blood, guts, and gore. And that kind of was like, as you said, squeamish or gross. But what I did, the first thing was how the body works, and then there's this guy that was on YouTube that he does talk about the body, but I mean, he'd kill an animal and he'll pull out the heart and he'll this. And I'm like, really? And he's just like all into it, And I've seen where that grew, as you said, if I didn't give in to that,
Yeah,
he
it
would have
grows
had this
into other
interest.
things. And then obviously because he's interested in the thing, or he was interested in the thing, he was more willing to read the books.
Yes,
And
yes.
even if it was difficult and he was struggling, he was willing to struggle because he wanted to know so badly. So sometimes we get in their way, to be
Yeah,
honest, because the
yeah.
things that would allow them to grow or develop that area of challenge, because it's not PC, as you said, we kind of like, oh, no, 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 the neighbor is going to think this, my parents are going to think that, society is going to say this, or it's going to turn you into a serial killer, or
Yes.
some, we just come up with these crazy stories that we tell ourselves, as opposed to looking at how we can use what their interests are to build or develop an interest in something else, or a skill.
So, as you pointed out, your child doesn't like to read, but they are into blood, guts, and gore. Do the research. What is there? Which book? It could be How the Body Works or blah, blah, which book you can get them into. And because they're into blood, guts, and gore, they'll read that book and you question them about it. So you're helping them with reading, comprehension, ask them to write about it, write a report on the book. 'Cause that's what I do. I take what they love and then I use it to say, okay, write me a report or sit down, tell me about it. And I want to hear how they articulate it and all of that. So, the possibilities are endless. We, as you said, sometimes we are the ones that get in their way.
And that's an important thing to note is, or that I've found, is where a boy will read, or for example, reading, they'll read something they're interested in and only that, and you can't get them to do anything else. Whereas with a girl, they'll read it, even if they find it boring, they'll read it and then be like, oh, I didn't like it, or oh no, I prefer this, or I prefer that. But I found that with my sons, it was just like, nah, it's not happening. I'm not curious. I don't want to read that. I don't want to read that. Nope, I don't want to read no Nancy Drew or Hardy Boys. I don't want to read that. And then they just found things that they're interested in, and you're like, why would you want to read this? But it depends on what your goal is. Is it to teach them to read or to get them to practice reading? Or is it because you want to say my child read the classics?
Exactly.
So you just have to figure out and balance and fit and find what fits your
right. We actually went into it without me asking the question. The question is that what do we do with the knowledge after understanding how our boys learn? What do we do with the knowledge? But I think we kind of went into that organically by talking about.
There's some more, like in terms of like, to be a little bit more specific, because a lot of us, we are very concerned with the academic and the academic skills.
Oh man, you and I, we saw someone do that the other day when she was so worried about her daughter being behind. And I was like, why does she keep saying that? But as you said, we are so concerned about the academics. I'm like, this child is 6 years old. How behind can she be? It doesn't matter. People learn to read and write as adults and go on to get PhDs.
And not only that, even when you transition, because I remember moving to the UK and leaving Jamaica. When we came here, my younger one was in grade 1 at the time, and he was going to school at the time, and he was in grade 1. At this time, granted, he's an early reader and he was reading chapter books from kindergarten, but that aside, you're expected to know how to read in kindergarten in Jamaica. We get here and in grade 1, they're just learning phonics. And I'm just like, what the rock of ages is this? So what were you doing? So what were you doing the other 3 years in school before the other 2 years, like nursery and kinder? So 3 years nursery and kinder. What were you doing? But what I found was, and just observing it instead of knocking it. And luckily, because I'm an educator, like it interests me, even though I'm saying rock of ages, it's like, oh, but it's something to observe and see what, what is happening. But the thing is, what I learned was, by the end of the year, the kids who were strong readers. The kids who would have struggled anyway were still struggling. Exactly. There were children who got to the point where they were reading as well as my son was. So it's like, okay, so I start, and I remember also when I was pregnant, and I was like, and I And everybody was saying, oh, you need to register them for school and stuff. And
Mhm.
my husband was looking at me like, but the baby don't even born yet. Like what? And I'm like, oh no, but they go to school at like 18 months or two, thereabouts. And he's like, what? And he's like, school. And I'm like, yeah, like school. And he's like, I didn't go to school until I was 7.
Mhm.
He said, I did not start school until I was 7. Like not daycare, not kindergarten, not anything.
Yeah.
I stayed home and I went to school at 7. So it was foreign to him that people were talking about it before the baby was born. And then after the baby was born, it was a struggle to find a place because people had registered for how long. And then when we got a book list, he was just like, what's going on? Why do they need books
Yeah.
and things shouldn't they be playing? And he's no worse for the wear.
Exactly.
So you figure it out. And the thing is too, like once you learn to read, you learn to read. What
Thank
is
you.
different is if you love reading or you don't love reading.
Mhm.
But how many levels of reading are there? Like once you can decode and comprehend, you can decode and comprehend. So even if I did it at 2 and you do it at 7,
Mhm.
we
There's
level
no big
up.
difference. Right.
We level out. So sometimes not sometimes, we just need to give each child what they need and just let them run their own
Mhm.
race. Let
Yeah.
them run their own race, do what suits each individual child
Yeah. And
and not.
to remind each parent is that this thing about a child being slow, unless the child has some biological issues or whatever, as far as and even then, as far as I know, there's no slow child. Everybody is different. Everybody learns at their own pace. So when one person can't read at 6, the other one is but they can't read at 6, but they very good at math. The other one can read at 3, but they can't add one and one and whatever. Everyone is just at their own pace, and just it depends on that child. And so what we need to do is to nurture that child and just give them the motivation they need and support, and not stress out the poor picnic.
But what I was saying, because this is important and I don't want to forget it, in terms of
Okay.
like the academic stuff, how we
Mhm.
can help, or like, for example, with the writing, like story writing and sentence writing. Um, you could probably, you'll give the assignment to the class. And for the most part, a little girl will sit down and she'll write something relating to like a princess story or something she has
Mhm.
read, whether it's
Mhm.
princess or a mystery, or
Right.
depending on what they've been exposed to. It doesn't necessarily have to be princess, but whatever they've been exposed to, they will write something about that. Whereas be, um, that kind of exercise might be more difficult to say for a 6-year-old boy than it is for a 6-year-old girl. One of the things you
Mhm.
can do is to play into that whole visual and mechanical skills that they have. So instead of writing the story from memory, you can say to them, draw the story first,
Yes.
do a
Yes.
storyboard.
Mhm.
It does not mean, because what a lot of teachers do at this point is accept the storyboard as the assignment. The storyboard is not the assignment.
Yeah.
You do the storyboard, and then they can then look at the pictures and they can write about each picture and they can
Mhm.
talk about what they've written. And in the end, you still get the skill, get them to practice the skill you're trying to teach, to write a
Right.
sentence or to write a paragraph. It's just that they had the aid of the, and I wouldn't even say it's aid because they drew it themselves, because it's their
Mhm.
story. So
Right.
you don't necessarily have to give them the picture. Just you draw the story. What are the characters doing? And then after
Mhm.
they've drawn the picture, what is happening in this picture? And then it's easier for them to write. Because they'll be looking at it. Okay, so he's wearing a red shirt.
Mhm.
Boy's wearing a red shirt. He's dancing, because they have the visual cue,
Right.
because their working memory is not as developed. So that's one. The storyboard. um so, and you can use that for sentences as well. Draw the picture first or give them a picture and then let them So you want them to write a sentence, but what you're looking for is the capital letter, the punctuation, the noun, and the verb. Instead of pulling the sentence from thin air or just from the back of their heads, give them the picture and then allow them to write the sentence. Because what you're looking for is punctuation and grammar. Giving them the picture does not influence them being able to punctuate, to write the capital letters, to put a noun in there, and so on. Lots of movements and song. YouTuber has to have it, or they make up their own song, everything them knocking desk and beating.
I find when it comes to math, using song is worked for me for both of them, because it's with math, especially like your multiplication tables and things, because it's about memory. You note learning, but we do it in song. I remember even with reading things, I would be reading to them and I'm singing it and I'm acting it out and all of that when they were really young, because it helped me acting it out, or even letting them act with me. It helped to what do you call it now? Stuck in their minds.
Right. The repetition, the beat, the rhythm, the movement. One of the things I did was, like, when we were doing perimeter, I would make the shapes with tape on the floor, like really big on the floor. And then they would walk on the shape and be like, perimeter is the distance around.
Right.
And just repeat that while walking around whatever the shape is. Versus the surface area, which is the flat bit of the shape, and not the, and incorporate that kind of, movement into it, and it's not that the movement, like some people be like, okay, but how does the movement translate to, even if it's not like perimeter is the distance around, even if you're not walking around. See, even I remember it because we said it so many times. Perimeter is the distance around, or we would draw it on the table, like do the edges of the table. Perimeter is the distance around. Everything we have, we would do that, so it kind of gets stuck in your head. But it also gives them, even if the movement is not related to what you're saying, but just having the movement allows them to, I know it sounds weird, but it allows them to focus more, because they're not like trying to hold in the fidgetiness and and so on. Because we look at it and we're like, how can you concentrate if you're moving up and down? How can you concentrate if you're walking up and down? But the walking is feeding a sensory need, but it's not impacting, and it's freeing their minds to pay attention to something else. Do lots of breaks. So don't try and let them sit for an hour. So there's something called the Pomodoro Technique that we use: 25 minutes, 20 minutes, 5-minute break, 20 minutes, 5-minute break.
And that's when they're older, right? Because when my kids were younger, I think I didn't do more than 15, 10. As I got older, then the time span.
Yeah, it depends. Like some young kids can do 20, some is 15. But whatever it is, and a lot of people are worried about the distraction. How do you get them to settle down? Initially, it will be tricky, but once they realize what the routine is and they know what it is, they will adjust. In that 5-minute break, they can go get their water and stuff, but let them run. Let them run and do it. Like just get some movement in. And the third thing, or the last thing I'll say about that, is do lots of enrichment projects. So take it out of the book. You're learning about Egypt. Let them go make a map. Or go do some other type of research. Let them make a tomb and a mummy and all of that stuff. Just let them do it. Because you show them and you let them do it, and then they'll remember it, and it sticks and it registers more than just reading something in a book where there's just maybe a 2-dimensional flat picture. Like, okay,
So just like I remember when the boys were really young, you're teaching addition and multiplication. I'd go out in the yard and dig up stones and use leaves, use whatever I'm trying to do, as you said, something visual, and get the hands dirty and get them involved,
Yeah,
as you said.
hopscotch is a good thing. And you say
Yeah.
two, when you're
Oh,
doing
yes.
number bonds, 2 plus 2, and they have to jump on the 4.
Yes.
2 plus 1, and they have to jump on the number that it is. It doesn't
Right.
necessarily have to be sitting down and writing
Right.
it.
And I
Or
think with boys, you do need to engage more than one senses. We think, sit, be quiet, and read. I think with boys, if you can engage other senses in at the same time, they grasp it a lot better. Well, that's been my experience.
yes.
I think. So you had one more point on that, or did
So,
you cover all?
that was the last point on that. But I thought it was important to mention it because I know a lot of people, or most of us, not a lot of people, all of us, myself included, at some point, you get kind of, you just want to make sure the academics will be all right, because that feeds into so many things. So with the play and the movement, it's not that we're saying academic, it's not necessary. It's something to facilitate
Right.
the academics that we're all aiming towards or to master.
Right. Those are very good points, and I guess I didn't do too bad because some of those I've even incorporated myself when the boys were younger, and still do. They're a little older now, both in high school, so they're fine.
Fine.
But it's like, oh, they're fine, I don't need to do anything. Okay, so the last question I wanted to ask you is, what can you leave parents with to help them keep their cool? As Caribbean people and as people of African descent, we joke about it. I like TikTok, and you see the little skits, and we laugh when we watch it. And even though I laugh too, I've never experienced it, but I laugh. But sometime after laughing, I said, wow, that's not good. You see and well, I've experienced the frustration in trying to get my child to understand something. But luckily, when I realize we're both being frustrated, I back off.
Back off, yeah.
I'm sure you've seen it, Johnny, 2 plus 2, and Johnny go 5, and daddy or mommy pick up the ruler or the belt. Johnny, 2 plus 2, and the child is crying, and mommy or daddy getting frustrated, and I would even beat the child.
Right.
And I'm saying,
you don't even think about the phrasing of the question, or you don't think anything. So
but even
you don't think about other
that's
things that might
traumatic.
impact him. It is because the belt just what you call it, instill fear.
Exactly.
And once the body goes into the fear mode, it's fright or flight. It's not calm thinking.
Exactly. And I'm thinking to myself, though people think, because I like to put myself in situations. If I'm trying to learn something and I'm frustrated to the point of tears, there is no way I'm going to learn it. So you can imagine the person who is trying to show me is then going to shout at me and maybe even call me names, stupid. As parents, we really do need to think about what we're doing. And like I said, if I saw myself getting frustrated, we both need a timeout. And I put on some music and we dance and we sing and whatever, because I'm frustrated too, but I know we need to just, you know what? We can do this later. Take a break.
Take a break. Well, that was one of the first things I was going to say. Set yourself up for success.
Yes.
If you're stressed or tired, leave it alone.
Yeah.
You don't go, your child is there, he needs help or she needs help, they need help, and you're tired, you're worried about your deadline or something, and you go, and because you need the homework or the task done in 5 minutes because you have other things to do, the child might not understand in 5 minutes. If you're stressed and you're tired, leave it alone.
Exactly.
Look at the homework or the assignment, or if you're teaching them, look at the topic and make sure you understand what is happening before you sit with them. Because you can imagine a child is not understanding, or you're trying to teach them something, halfway through you're like, oh no, that is not it, and you try and you're figuring it out. They're confused because it's 5 times, you now go, oh no, that is not
right.
figure out what is it that needs to be done before you do it. Pay attention to, as you say, you, not talking about the child. No, pay attention to you, your body, and your
energy.
Like if you realize that you're getting stressed, step away. Step away, back away from it, come back, think about it, cool down, come back, whether it's tomorrow, next week, whenever. Step away, come back, because there's more to be gained from delaying it than just trying to get it out of the way. Because often, all times, what also happens is you just want to get it out of the way. You get so frustrated, you just write in the answer, or you just tell them the answer. That has helped. Nobody has been helped in that situation.
Exactly.
And it also, I think, teaches your child to step away. For them, they themselves, when something is difficult, step away, breathe, reset, and come back. Focus on what your child is trying to say to you. That's the third thing. They might not be saying it orally or verbally, but they, are they tired? Did they come to your office and sit down, and you're now coming home at 9:00 at night and you're cooking while trying to do the homework? Are they tired? Are they hungry? Are they confused? Are they triggered by a particular topic? Did something happen in a math class, and every time they have a math homework or a history homework, they get tense because they remember that bad thing that happened with the teacher or the teacher's reaction or something like that. So what are they communicating? Are they sick? Were they sick before? Were they getting sick? Get help. If you don't know, you don't know. You shouting at the child not going to let them know. You shouting and stressing is not going to it's not going to inform you either. So get help. The help can be a tutor, it can be a friend, it can be your child's friend. Okay, John understands this topic. Let John come over and let John explain it. Let John explain it to you. Because you're the parent, it doesn't mean you're a master of all things. It doesn't mean you're all knowing. Know what your strong suits are and what your weaknesses are, and you work with that. If the English homework is not your thing, find a friend. Come help Johnny with this, or something. Because if you are there and you're miserable and you're flustered, or you are triggered by the thing itself, you are transferring that. Transferring that to your child. So that is what I would say. Get help. Focus on what your child is communicating to you physically as well as verbally. Pay attention to your own reactions and your own stressors and triggers, and set yourself up for success. If you're not in the mood to do it, don't attempt to do it. Even when the boys were in school, I was that mother. If everybody's fussing about the homework is not going to get done just because the teacher needs it in the morning.
Exactly.
It's not going to get done. And see, last night wasn't a good night. We'll revisit. We'll do it on the weekend. We'll send it, whatever. But I'm not doing the homework just to do it. In the scenario we're in now, I am not finishing a topic just to finish a topic. I'm not doing that. If it's not working out today, we will and come again. Okay, the way I'm teaching it, he or she doesn't seem to be understanding. So let me go look for another way. Or sometimes I realize that I don't understand it enough to explain it.
Right.
So I need to go and find the words to be able to explain it properly, or explain it in a way that they understand. And so you just have to set yourself up for success. And
I'm just realizing why I never experienced that with my mom being frustrated with me while helping with schoolwork. because the truth is she never did help me. She always got someone else. And I think that, yeah. And I want to say this to mothers. A lot of times we're afraid to ask for help, but I have found, even on social media, just putting a message out there saying, look, I'm having a hard time helping my child with math or whatever. And you'd be surprised.
You would be
Somebody would jump
surprised.
up and say what it is. We can Zoom, we can Google Meet, we can whatever. Even before pandemic, that has happened
Yeah,
with
or
me.
they just write out the steps and explain
Right.
each step to you. Because as you said, people are willing to help if we're willing to ask for it. Because
Exactly.
I've seen situations where I remember when I was working in a building in New Kingston, and the
Mhm.
security guard's child would come there, and he was not afraid to be like, Miss, come here, you know how to do this? Sure. Like, when the child would
Exactly.
be there doing the homework, and he don't care who it was, he would just be like, Miss, you know how to do this? Or
Hmm.
explain this to me, let me do it. Or
Yeah.
they'll read it to you and say, show me how to do it. So when my son come this evening, or when my daughter come this evening,
Hmm.
I can show them. So, and I've never seen a situation where somebody has not stopped, or somebody has not
Yeah.
helped. Or they'll be like, oh, I don't know, but the lady upstairs that do the schedule, she good with numbers. So I'm going to ask her
Mhm.
and come back, or I'm going to send her to
Exactly.
you. So just ask, as you say.
Yeah.
Ask. Somebody will be there to help.
For
You're
me,
not alone.
I usually ask the teachers. I'm saying, look, when I did this in primary school, we did it a lot different. Show me the techniques you're using so I can help my child. So I'll sit there with the teacher for half an hour. She walks me through it. So when I come home, I can help them. But let us not be scared to ask for help.
And that's a good and what I always say to mothers and to my children, teachers are willing to help if they
Yeah.
see that you need the help and you're willing to ask.
When they're
Nothing
willing.
a teacher likes more than an involved parent.
I'm telling you.
Teacher will sit down with you under the mango tree
Hmm.
and show you. You're going to say, Auntie or Miss, depending on which school you're in,
Yeah.
and say, I don't understand the homework you send home. Because as I said, when I did this in school, it was called something else,
Yeah.
or I would do it another way. So this 12 step addition,
Right.
I don't know about this, I can carry.
Right.
Right? I can carry,
Exactly.
but I can't do this
Exactly.
10 step. And they'll be like, all right, and they'll walk you through it, because they also know that chances are what they're teaching is not what the parent was taught.
Yeah.
So teachers will help you, other parents will help you. So just ask.
That's
Just
all
ask.
you have to do.
And it takes a
Yeah.
village.
Yes, it does. It
It
really
takes a
does.
village. You
You know,
you
I,
can't do it all by yourself.
true. And the thing is, we really need to remember we are there to help our children. But if we listen to ourselves, I need them to get the homework done. I need them to do X. I need them. So it's really not about the child anymore. It's about you. I had a friend who, when my kids, they all went to the same school, and she lived in Old Harbor. So that's far. And because they left out so early, so they get to school very early. And most mornings I would be there with him. Um, or when she got to school, she'd be cussing, you don't do the homework last night and blah, blah, blah. And I said, what time you get home? And because of traffic, everything, she gets home like 9, whatever. That's when they're doing dinner and all of that. She said sometimes they fall asleep in the car, by the time they reach home, it's just straight to bed so they don't, shower till the morning and all of that. And I said to her, look, you get here like 2 hours before school starts. Stop stressing yourself. Since you're here so early, and it's also 2 hours before you have to get to work, 2.5 hours actually. Do the homework here at school.
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand why people think I was that mother that me pat them up. Sometimes them go to school. This is when we reach to school, the uniform put on, breakfast eat. Why we stressing ourselves out that it must be done a certain way? It's that I
I guess
think it's the
because
end
we're just
result.
we're just used to a certain way, I guess. But you're right. Just really look at your situation and the reality of it. Homework for you might mean doing it when you get back to school the next morning. It might mean doing it in the office lunchroom
Exactly.
while your child wait for you, or do it in the car while you wait to pick up, while you're waiting for your partner to leave work, you know, and you have one car. You do, sometimes it's doing it on the bus. I have done many a homework on the bus. You know, so because I'm from Old Harbor as well, so I know that journey, and that's Old Harbor without highway.
There you
Right?
go.
So you just have to work with what you have. And I think one of the things that causes the stress, as you say, it becomes about the parent, and it's not about what the child can do, because sometimes you look on some homework and the homework is so perfect, you're like, the child didn't do this.
Exactly.
You know, the child didn't do this. But it becomes about their appearances, or what you want the teacher to think, or what you want the teacher to say, and the focus changes. So as you say, sometimes we need to just step back and not make it about us, and not make it about Johnny or the student of the month or the student of the year or whatever. It's not about how the child stacks up next to this or that child, but where does he stack up last term compared to this term, last week compared to this week. And what the other children are doing is none of your business.
Exactly.
You know, because what you're looking at is, you know, it is not only progress, but you just want to make sure your child learns and understands, and that you're building a strong foundation.
Exactly.
Because we know that once the kids, as you mentioned earlier, by the time the children reach high school, we kind of leave them on their own, and they have to kind of just navigate. It's unfair to do all the homework for them, or overextend yourself in helping them do the homework, and then send them to high school and they're on their own. So slow and steady wins the race. Better we go slower and understand. And as I said earlier, Timmy might be reading at 6. You have to wait till 7 or 8 to read. You know, my older son was in grade 1, 2, and not reading. My younger one was reading in kindergarten. They're both reading the same books now.
Exactly. As I said, it's so funny. Your older is like my younger, and you're, the other way around, because
they're both reading the same books now. So
my younger, when he was going into grade 1, they wanted to keep him back in kindergarten, and I remember it's an old-time teacher, and she said, keep him back for what? Because she was working with him. And she said, but he understands stuff and whatever, for whatever reason. And I truly think it was a teacher at the time, but I'm not going to blame anyone. And she said, let him go into grade 1 and just tell the teacher what the issue is and whatever. And before the year was out, he was reading, and now he has to have every single Diary of a Wimpy Kid book, and he's an avid reader now. So as you said, it doesn't matter where they start once they start.
And it's just giving them the right tools and understanding that the process for your son might be a little different from the process you go through with your daughter. And that's not because your son is it's not because he's bad. It's not because he's possessed by the devil, or whatever reason we choose to give it. It's simply that the brain develops in a different,
and each child is different.
In a different way.
If I compared my younger one to my older one, I'd say something is wrong. Because my older one, like your younger, was reading in grade 1. They're like, he's reading at a grade 3, 4 level. The other one at grade 1 wasn't reading. But two of them bright. You know what I mean?
So it's just
Luckily, I didn't get all worked up about it. I just said, okay, learn, you know.
right. Getting the right tools, and using the right, giving them the skill set,
Yeah.
getting them the right tools, and being patient, and not overcompensating in one area while the strengths atrophy. So
Mm-hmm.
okay, they're not reading at grade level right now, or they're not recalling their times table. And because they're not doing those two things, or one of those two things, you spend every waking hour doing that, versus
Mm-hmm.
realizing, oh, but they're good at retaining dates, or
Yeah.
they can explain, if they've seen it or if they've heard it, they'll remember it,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
not making use of those skills, because
Yeah.
those skills will come in handy later on.
Exactly.
But you're not developing those muscles because you're so concerned with
Mm-hmm.
one thing or the two things that they're not doing right this moment,
Yeah.
not realizing you can work on both of them. You can build the strengths, and you
Mm-hmm.
can work on develop the weaknesses. You don't have to focus on one thing. And just remember, all the time, the brain develops differently.
That's right.
The brain develops differently. So I just need to teach this particular thing in a different way. So I can
Mm-hmm.
teach you both to write, and I can teach you to be both great creative writers.
Mm-hmm.
But I need to have you do a storyboard first, whereas I can just give you a sentence starter,
Mm-hmm.
and then you will run with it. But another child might need a storyboard. Somebody will need a mind map,
Yes. Yes.
versus somebody who can just hold it together and let it flow just
Mm-hmm.
from just from their head. And then the end result is the same. The end
Exactly.
result is the same, but we're so caught up in
In the
how
process.
to
Yeah.
get there. Like the process has to be this particular way, when it doesn't have to be.
Exactly.
It doesn't
There's
have to
so many ways to get to the same end result. Let's allow each person a little creative liberty,
be.
to do it
Yeah,
their
like I
way.
was saying, I remember I said to a friend one time, because she was, well, it was more of an acquaintance, but she was getting caught up about how long her child was taking to do something, when
Mm-hmm.
compared to other people in the class. And I said, so if we're going downtown, right? We're going downtown to the Scotia building, the big Scotia building. If you go straight down Halfway Tree Road, I go through New Kingston, through like South Camp Road, and go around that
Mm-hmm.
end. You go straight down Halfway Tree Road, Crossroads, Torrington Bridge,
Mm-hmm.
and you go that way. Will we both get there? We're both going to get there. We might not get there
Exactly.
at the same time. Somebody
Mm-hmm.
might meet up a little bit more traffic.
Right.
Something, you might go away,
Mm-hmm.
come back, but
Mm-hmm.
we're both going to get there.
Exactly.
So don't get so caught up with how as long as we all get to the same destination, it is fine.
Yeah.
It is fine. We don't have to get there by the same method. We don't have to get there at the same time
Mm-hmm.
and stuff. As long as we get there safely, and everybody can retain the information. It's,
Exactly. Yeah, man. Well, Nadia, thank you so much. We
no
had a
problem.
cup this time again, but I think this is a good recording. I'll put it up so people can watch, and put it in the group. They can ask their questions in the comments, and I'm sure you will come on and tell them yay, nay, no, whatever. And
Right.
thing.
And
But
if the questions are there and I've not responded, you can just nudge me,
okay,
and I'll
okay.
definitely, if there are questions, I'll definitely answer.
But you've definitely given us a wealth of information here that we can use to help our boys to be the best they can be and to help them succeed. And also information for us, parents, mothers, on how to help them.
How to help them, yes.
So Thank you once again.
You are welcome anytime. Anytime, despite the hills and valleys we had to go through and the many rivers we had to cross.
Believe me, because while we're here talking, I have my fingers crossed that my Wi-Fi doesn't go out. Not my Wi-Fi, but my data doesn't run out. I'm like, I'm still here, so I'm grateful. And again,
so we managed to make it to the end.
Yes, we have.
Yes. So hopefully, and we got all the points out. So
yeah.
hopefully it's helpful to any mom who watches.
I'm sure it will be.
And as you said, if they can just ask the questions in the chat after you've posted, and I will respond.
Okay. Okay, great to see you. Bye, everybody.
Bye. How do I do this?